Hi everybody, and a really warm welcome to the latest episode of our Geostrategy in Action series. Today we're talking about sustainability, which neatly combines two of my biggest passions, sustainability and geopolitics. And clearly there is a really interesting interaction at the moment between the sustainability agenda on the one side and all things geopolitical on the other. And I'm delighted to be joined today by Amy Braccio, who goes by the very great title of the Global Vice Chair Sustainability here at EY. So Amy, firstly, welcome and thanks for joining.
Oh, thanks so much for having me.
And Amy, do you want to start by saying what your role is at EY? That would be really helpful.
Yes. Yeah, I'm happy to. And so I do know that in this field, you can have a title like that, but maybe no one knows exactly what that means. So I think about it in three different elements. There's one that we are a large organization, we're global in nature, and we have a commitment of our own. And so I have an important voice with respect to what we do as an organization around reducing our carbon emissions, what we do in nature, and beyond that. The next piece is, and I think where we actually have the biggest impact, is that our clients need our help in achieving their own ambition with respect to sustainability. So making sure we have the skills and capabilities and ability to help our clients. And then lastly, engaging with our people. So we're about 400,000 people strong around the world. Not everyone is going to get to work on sustainability like we do, but they have great interest. And so making sure that they have opportunities to learn and engage on the topic of sustainability is that third element.
Thanks, Amy. And I think it's great to have those three different perspectives on here. I think we might draw on that during the conversation today. So that's great. And of course, this episode is coming out during London Climate Action Week, and that's no coincidence. We thought it would be interesting to kind of consider the state of sustainability and the state of geopolitics during this really important week on the sustainability calendar. But Amy, for those who listen to this who are more from the geopolitical background, can you also just introduce us to London Climate Action Week and how does it fit into the wider calendar too?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that we're seeing really pop up around the world is a week where in that location, they focus on sustainability and climate. And, New York doing one alongside the UN General Assembly is one that we see. And London Climate Action Week is one of great prominence as well. And I think it's a time for London to be the focus of climate action. And what we see from our clients is that people from around the world are coming to be able to be a part of this very important dialogue that's taking place across the city. It also is being viewed as a bit of a road into. So we've got COP in Belém, Brazil, coming up this year in November. And these are some of the starting dialogues of what in particular does the private sector think needs to happen in order to make COP a successful process.
Thank you. So it's a really important part of this calendar. And as we know from our own experience of the week and the lead up to the week, one of the hot topics clearly is how the state of geopolitics at the moment is influencing the sustainability agenda, right? And I think it's fair to say that people are concerned, right? And they're concerned with good reason. And whether it's President Trump's administration and some of his actions, whether it's the European Union rolling back timetables and scope for reporting and other things, it's definitely not just a US issue. Obviously, governments at the moment are reevaluating their sustainability policies. They're reevaluating, I guess, the cost of those policies and so on and so forth. And I think people are concerned, and I think it's important to sort of understand that. But I know that you and I would like to also take a view that, yes, it's concerning, but there are some reasons to be optimistic too as well. And that might be because many governments are still very much committed to sustainability agendas. And it might be that some other aspects of geopolitics, in particular, some of the geopolitics around energy, are actually sort of in some ways supportive of a sustainability and indeed a climate agenda. So what's your view, Amy, here? How do you see it, and how do some of the people you deal with day in, day out see this?
So I am really looking forward to the discussions that take place over the course of London Climate Action Week. And as I think about it, a lot of people are really just trying to make sense of everything because we see that, two things are true at once. We are seeing and feeling the impact of climate change in our daily lives. In the UK, it's extraordinarily hot. And at the same time, we've got these geopolitical trends that you talked about, where you see some looking to take a bit of a step back. And I think for many, it's just how do you put those two things together? What we do see, particularly from a private sector perspective, is that organizations are taking a look at, from a sustainability and climate change perspective, what is core to their business and is going to allow them to mitigate the risks that they need to mitigate while taking the opportunities that they see in this area as well. So I think what we're going to see is a lot of being very focused on what are the actions that make sense for our industry and our business, and being very specific about what those are, whether it is a move to renewable energy, whether it is waste reduction, which can also be cost reduction, whether it is making sure that you understand the physical risks and how you're going to respond to them over time. So this real sort of focused and tangible discussion around what is important, I think, is what will come up. And I also like that. Like, I know you and I both like to be optimists, but when you think about it through that lens, when organizations are doing things that are core to their business, that means they're scalable and they're durable over time. And I think it'll drive the action that we need to see. Now, maybe not, we need more to get to the pace we need, but we will see the strong action.
Yeah, I think that's a point really well made, that durable action has certain characteristics. And if the current, in a sense, pressures on the system lead to more durable and sort of sustainable in the other sense of the word action, then I think that is a good thing. I'm not saying it's all good, but I think that's a good thing. I think the other point that I would make in addition is that if you look at some of the wider geopolitical trends, and listeners to this will have heard us talk a lot about economic competition and the growth of kind of tariff and non-tariff barriers. And we can debate the pros and cons of tariffs and of these kind of the trading arrangements at the moment. But one of the features is that a lot of it is driving towards nearshoring or onshoring. And when we ask companies, when we do research with companies, they say, and we ask them what they're doing in response to tariffs, which is a difficult position for them to be in. The top two answers, the first answer that they give is that they're looking at local sourcing options, basically. Now, that doesn't guarantee that it's good for the environment, but it's a good chance that perhaps there's a lower overall carbon footprint if that's the response. And then the second thing they say is they're looking at innovation in their supply chain and innovation in their products. And again, does that guarantee they're more sustainable? No, it doesn't guarantee that they're more sustainable. But again, it's at the very least a really good chance for sustainability and those sort of advocating as a more sustainable approach to be involved in that sort of innovation in that product design and perhaps to lead to more sustainable outcomes. And so it's an inadvertent kind of complication of geopolitics, but potentially it's also an opportunity for those who are seeking to make progress, not just on climate change, but also on things like packaging, recycling, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. The other thing that you and I have talked a lot about is this sort of shift to renewables as part of national security. And so when you look at the conflicts around the world, it does get in the way of some of the energy markets. And so the more that countries are able to generate their own energy, and oftentimes that generation would have to be more the renewable sources to do it onshore, the more we can have the energy transition taking place.
Yeah, that's another great point. So I think maybe to summarize, we've got almost 3 points here, haven't we? We've got this sort of greater discipline and durability of the sustainability agenda, particularly perhaps within the private sector and corporates and so on. We've got the fact that the sort of localization, friendshoring has potential opportunities for the sustainability space, and recycling on all those things that we often talk about. And then thirdly, some symbiosis between energy security and sort of renewable energy as well. And so, look, those are 3 really good reasons, I think, to be kind of optimistic, despite what is clearly a wider picture that's not at all easy for the sustainability agenda at the moment. I wanted to just add to that, and you mentioned that the UK has been through, for instance, a very hot spell, and we've already got some what we call hosepipe bans here in the UK in place in some regions. Adaptation is also important. This is not just a kind of mitigation question. So how are you seeing adaptation? How does that interplay, if at all, with geopolitics? And how are corporates approaching that generally?
Well, I think there are a couple ways that it comes into play. And so, one, I think I'm part of the World Economic Forum's Future Council that's focused on equitable energy transition. And the idea behind that is that we talk about climate change, we talk about energy transition, but we're not always talking about the people who are impacted at the same time. And so, when a lot of times when I think about where things get stuck from a political standpoint, it's when people get left behind. And so, as that work at the more macro level is done, a lot of thought has to be put into adaptation because this is happening today. To people around the world are feeling the effects, like we talked about. From a business standpoint, what we're seeing is that more and more of these physical risks that are caused by climate change are having a real business impact on organizations. Of course, it starts in the insurance space, and they're having to look at the impact of physical risk. And then what are the steps that you take to, say, make houses more durable during a wildfire or an extreme storm and things like that. And we're seeing the same from corporate clients in taking a step back at what are the physical risks that are impacting our business in the near term, and how are we taking steps to adapt to that new reality.
Yeah, really interesting. Thanks, Amy. And perhaps last couple of questions. I want to pick at a couple of aspects of your role. So, firstly, what does it feel like to be a kind of CSO, so a Chief Sustainability Officer, in the kind of current environment? And do you see that role changing, generally speaking, but also is it changing given the geopolitical environment?
Yeah. So, a couple of things to think about. And one, I was having a conversation with an Oxford professor recently, and one a comment he made was the laws of thermodynamics don't get changed by election cycles. And so I do think it's just important to be able to step back with all of this going on and remember this is a real problem that our clients, the world needs to solve, and we need to keep moving forward, acknowledging the challenges, but moving forward nonetheless. And so you do need that kind of mindset to be able to do it. The other thing is you need an ability to be able to step back and think about what are the things that really matter to an organization. Like we talked about, what are those things that are core in order to be able to, for an organization to thrive in the long run, and be really clear about why you're doing what you're doing and the fact that it aligns to your business objectives. And then the other thing that you do see is you do see different organizations, taking a look at where should the head of sustainability report? Is it still required that they report to the CEO? And where in the organization should they be? At what level? In some ways, people take that as a concern that organizations are stepping back from the topic. In other ways, though, you start to see that it's being embedded across the organization in a way that some of these things are moving more towards business as usual. And I would argue for the durability point that you raised, like that if it's business as usual, that it's being integrated across the organization as a whole, that's a good thing for how you get things done, and better than something that's off to the side.
That's really interesting because with my geopolitical hat on, one of the things we argue for a lot is that sort of incorporating geopolitics into your business systems and processes should be business as usual, right? And I
Yeah.
think you're arguing a similar thing, which is actually it's a good thing if sustainability is part of the business as usual, not necessarily a bad thing. But I also do understand how that feels in a way as
Yeah.
both as a sustainability person and a geopolitical person, that feels a little bit tricky. So yeah, really interesting. So Amy, one last question, and I'm picking at your third sort of role within EY here. So you talked about our 400,000 people and what they can do and their attitude to sustainability, and how do you see? And you talk to people across the world on this. Obviously, EY is in a very large number of countries. Just tell us all a little bit about, how our workforce and how our people are thinking and approaching this issue.
So, not to sound corny, but we're a purpose-led organization, and our purpose is building a better working world. And this is just one of the topics that is so core to who we are and what we do. And what I see is that for many of our people, this is something where they really want to get engaged. Now, I think the common sentiment is, oh, you mean all the young people, right? And so, yes, we definitely do see that our younger people want to get involved in volunteer work. They want to be able to give back. They have high expectations for us as an organization on what we do, and they push to make sure that we're doing it. But I find it actually cuts across the generations. Now, maybe you could argue that those of us that are a little more senior, it's our kids who are forcing the dialogue at home and saying, what are you doing about this? But either way, I mean, I lead a lot of what we do from a learning curricula standpoint. Our most senior people are taking that learning in the same way that our more junior team members. And I find that to be really an exciting thing, and to be able to provide people with knowledge so they can make a difference.
Yeah, interesting. Look, I think it's great to end on a positive note, because, as you say, governments have to balance different objectives at different times and places. But I liked your story of the sort of the laws of thermodynamics not changing. But also, I think people, what people think doesn't change in the long run. But at different times, they might have different pressures on them and their household budget and those kind of things. But I still think what you're saying is that if you take, in this context, our workforce only, then we still do see people really interested and really passionate about this space. And look, perhaps that's a really nice place to end on a high point. But so, Amy, thank you for joining us. Thanks for sharing your perspectives on this sort of complicated nexus between geopolitics and sustainability. And without being naive and without sort of pretending hopefully we've given a few people some optimistic things to think about here too. So, Amy, thanks so much for joining.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. It was a great discussion, and I really appreciate being part of it.
Thank you, Amy. And thanks everyone for listening in. And I mentioned right at the top that this was combining two of my biggest passions in geopolitics and sustainability. And we're also releasing this week a conversation with Catherine Friday, our government and public sector league. So we've got a trifecta, because that's my third big passion. So this week we've had sustainability, geopolitics, and look out for a separate episode on the impact of geopolitics on government. It's really interesting. So please look out for that, and do browse the other episodes that are on various websites. So thanks everybody for joining, and hopefully see you very soon.